All right, welcome back to Lost for Words with Lori. What day is it? It is 420, bitches. Yeah. We all know what that means, right? Everybody gets twisted. Not even, right? But happy 420 to all of those who partake, I guess. That's the name of the game. How's everybody doing? It is hump day. We love that camel, right? So it is midweek, and it is time for me to touch base and check in with all you happy people, because that's what the Lori do. And yeah, it's been kind of a roller coaster as always. It's been good. It's been bad. Things are kind of rolling along here in the Heathen's Haven, and I've been keeping an eye on things in toxic cesspool world, because that's normally what fuels the the engine that could, right? But it's crazy. I was talking with my girls and my friends and my sister from another mister about content and my ability and my need and my want to talk with all of you guys and spread wisdom. And I love the sound of my own voice because I'm kind of a big deal. But I'm working on putting together a video for our last little adventure and road trip. Because I like to recap all of the adventures that we do. And I was interested in, getting out a couple of things and doing what I do. And I was trying to come up with a subject to talk about. And, I had therapy yesterday for the first time in 2 months, and that was awesome. And, working on my stuff, but also just things that other people are dealing with and working on as well. And trying to come up with what should we do? What do we do? What do we talk about? And I, was looking back through some of my previous podcasts because I don't want to be redundant and I don't want to cover the same shit. But, the journey and the healing process and all of the things in life that we deal with always comes back to a couple of very real things that are recurring and important and need to, I don't know, I guess, kind of be hammered home constantly and consistently. And, I guess I'm going to revisit accountability again, folks, because it's in my first world, and it's in my second world, and it's in my third world, and it's always in my face. And so I went back and I listened to my original podcast on accountability, which was 4 months ago, believe it or not, 4 months ago on December 7th. And I did a podcast on accountability, and I went back and listened to that to just kind of get an idea about unpacking that and how that consequences and all of that, what my thoughts were back then and how different or not different things are now compared to what my thoughts were 4 months ago about accountability. And and I don't really think my thoughts have changed. I still sat here and agreed with everything that I had said back then. However, a lot has happened in 4 months as far as accountability, and where was I sitting then compared to where I am now, as far as my own path and what I've been dealing with. Because, Toby had just died, and there was so much drama surrounding that and so many other things. And since then, there's been, new situations and new things that come up, and other people, hearing and listening and being held accountable for their behavior, including myself. And, before March, I had some of my own things that I needed to obviously be held accountable for in my first world, and things that were unresolved, that kind of came back over the new year and even since then, that I had, the universe kind of saw fit to, lay down in my lap and give me the opportunity to open some discussions, to give me the opportunity to either be able to be held accountable for some of my things, or to be able to have really important discussions with people, where I was able to have those dialogues that were very healing and very necessary, I think, to just say, these are the things that were my responsibility, and I've accepted those things, and to be able to communicate with people that I may or may not had some unresolved issues with. And it's been a very nice segue into the journey of learning about myself and about being able to express to some of you guys how I practice what I preach, and I live by the things that I believe, and I do wholeheartedly subscribe to that accountability and consequence theory in my first world and in my life. I didn't play victim with these people. I wholeheartedly owned my stuff. And I also didn't air any of that in public. I didn't air my dirty laundry, or theirs for that matter. And I mean, these are people from my past. This is 5 years ago. This isn't any third world social media stuff. This was my first world. And I was able to handle my conflicts and my, issues with people from my past like an adult, and be able to sit down and have real good, clear discussions about, where we miscommunicated, or where, I made mistakes and was able to rectify some of those things. And so going back and listening to the podcast that I did back in December, and what was going on at that time, and knowing what was going on at that time and what kind of the drama and the issues were at that time, becomes very insightful as we roll forward 4 or 5 months from then, and the changes that have gone on, and the people in my life back then that were creating some of those issues. And things change drastically and dramatically between then and now. And after the new year, there were people who were trying to reach out to me and try to make amends, and I wasn't emotionally ready to hear some of those apologies, because like I said, we're emotional beings, and we are angry about people doing us wrong, or having issues of bad communication and that kind of thing. And part of that learning process for me was being able to decide whether or not I wanted to expend energy on those things, and give those people opportunity to apologize, and to whether I wanted to accept those apologies and make amends with those people. And offer that forgiveness. And I've talked about forgiveness before on a different podcast, and a lot of people will honestly tell you that forgiveness is more about you than it is about the person who is asking for forgiveness. And in some cases, I do believe that that's definitely the case. But it's also a good lesson and a good learning point about holding yourself accountable for how many chances do you give people. What kind of boundaries do you put in place for other people? How transparent are you about the expectations that you have for people, especially when you're trying to resolve conflicts with people? And even in the previous podcast, I talked about trust, and how when people do things that upset you and you have conflicts, that you do lose trust. And part of that amending conflict, resolving conflict issue, then it does become a trust thing. Because I've been able to tell people, I will accept your apology, but you still have to prove that I can trust you. And I'm still a firm believer that actions speak louder than words, and that you do need to change behavior in order for people to trust you. And again, that's a time thing. That takes time, because you're always going to be wondering if people are sincere after they've hurt you, or what kind of motive they might have for what they're doing now. And to be fair, that's a very logical thing for anybody to go through when they've been hurt. And I think in my past, we call that a trauma response, that when somebody hurts you, you just no longer trust them. And I think that's fair. The difference is that, as an adult, as a free-thinking, logical human who thinks critically, I have that boundary where I don't have to. I don't have to accept anybody back in who either hasn't been accountable for their behavior, or even if they have held accountability and they're accepting the consequences, that becomes a consequence. And you can still accept somebody's apology, but the consequence is that you do not have to allow them to be back in your world and continuously repeat behaviors that are toxic. And so it's a fine line to walk, regardless of, like I said, actions do speak louder than words. And so I'm dealing with that in my first world now, with people from 5 years ago, with people from 5 months ago, with people from 5 days ago who may or may not have used words, or you may have said, hey, this is unacceptable, or I may have said something that triggered somebody else and had to apologize. But it's, again, what's the serious nature of what it is that you're trying to resolve? But that's one of the things, is that accountability just keeps coming up because there are still those out there who just refuse to accept that they are doing anything wrong whatsoever, and they continue to play victim, and they continue to seek validation and attention outside of themselves for whatever reason. And like I said in the first podcast that I did, I get it. I get that people have been treated poorly in their lives, and their only way to cope with that was to turn in a direction where they are completely defensive, and they turn around and treat people poorly. And like I said, that's fine as an excuse, but it does not validate or give them a good enough reason to be an asshole. So, you pick your battles, and you either choose to be a victim and choose that kind of poor behavior towards other people, which is basically going to get you nothing. It's going to get you thrown under the bus. It's going to get you cast out, and you aren't going to have any friends because you're an asshole. Or you can choose to get past that and use it, like I have in my past with all my trauma and the things that have happened in my world, to make better choices and to learn about yourself and find more positive ways to make your life and be a better person, and in I guess in the grand scheme of things, be better to other people, and therefore teach other people how to be better as well, which is what I've kind of hoped to have been accomplishing through everything: my healing journey, my grief journey, my podcast, just the people that I've come in contact with over the past 5 months. Because, like I said in the first podcast before, my life could have taken a completely different path. I could have done things much more destructively than I chose. But gratefully, I've got enough, character, I guess, or I've got enough conscience where I realized that hurting other people wouldn't do me any good. And it wasn't the path that I wanted to take. So, at the end of the day, just by me accepting my own accountability and letting others kind of be accountable for their stuff, and actually dropping that I don't have to listen to you, and I will at least give you enough 5 minutes of my time, or however long it took, to just maybe accept that maybe they're willing to learn about themselves and turn that other leaf and try. But the expectations are there, that you have to prove it by deed, and that your actions will speak louder than words, just like I have to prove that to other people. That maybe there's hope for all of us to learn, to grow, to evolve, and be the best versions of ourselves that we want to be. So those are my thoughts, I guess. Lately, I've just been really kind of, deep diving on accountability. It's everywhere. It needs to be everywhere. It needs to be in everybody's first world, whether you're just being accountable for feeding yourself and taking a shower, or if you need to be accountable for bullshit. It's important. It should be important, because the lessons that go with it are invaluable, to just being the best version of yourself that you can be. But that's all I got, I think, today. I hope everyone's having a great Wednesday. And till next time, guys, wash your fucking hands and be a good human. Love y'all.